Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Los Angeles Rams Insider Podcast. I'm your host and beat writer, Rock Vieira. You can check out all of our work at www.si.com/NFL /Rams /on SI, where we drop double digit pieces of content every single day. So today we're going to talk about Aubrey Pleasant, the Rams assistant head coach, what's been happening in this hiring cycle, why he wasn't hired for any of the four defensive coordinator openings that he interviewed for, and what does this move or the lack of a move mean for the Rams moving forward? So first off, let's talk about the situation. So assistant head coach and pass game coordinator is Aubrey Pleasant's title. What his job means is he has a tremendous amount of influence in-game tactical decisions, the defensive secondary's rotation, the construction of the defensive secondary, what they do to complete Chris Shula's defense, and of course the day-to-day development of those defensive backs. He played a tremendous role in the improvement of Emmanuel Forbes, the massive year-to-year jumps of Kobe Durant when he went from year two to year three, and of course from year three to year four, which he did this past season, and in the acquisition of Roger McCreary. Pleasant gave his inside information that he had because he worked with McCreary at the Senior Bowl when McCreary was coming out of Auburn. And of course, the Rams were able to execute a trade for McCreary in the middle of the season, bringing him over from the Tennessee Titans. So a lot of influence there. The four jobs that he interviewed for, all defensive coordinator openings, were with the Los Angeles Chargers, the Las Vegas Raiders, the Cleveland Browns, and the Arizona Cardinals. So I'll just go through all of them pretty quickly. In the situation of the Chargers decided to stick with a kind of an in-house hire in Chris O'Leary. He was Western Michigan's defensive coordinator this past season. Before that, he was part of Jim Harbaugh's inaugural staff in Los Angeles as the safeties coach. Under his guidance, Derwin James took his game up to another level, and then Elijah Molden, who the Chargers brought over via trade before the 2024 season, blossomed for them, allowing the Chargers to trade away Alohi Gilman to the Baltimore Ravens in the middle of this season, and that's why the Rams, who weren't a part of that trade, but did play the Ravens and kind of saw the results of that move. Um, that's kind of the whole tie-in over there. But the Chargers decided to stick with O'Leary, and that they're moving forward with him. Then when it came to the Raiders, who's now coached by Clint Kubiak, the former Seattle Seahawks offensive coordinator, who just won the Super Bowl, he decided to stick with another in-house hire for the Raiders, promoting Rob Leonard, um, essentially from a similar role that Pleasant has with the Rams. And there is a belief that Leonard, his promotion, is one of the big stepping stones in the Raiders' attempt to retain Max Crosby. But they also believe in Leonard as a premier defensive mind, and that's why they made that move. The Cleveland Browns hired Mike Rutenberg. I hope I said his name correctly, from Atlanta. He's known as a guy that really understands defensive coverages. So the Browns are bringing him in, of course, to pair with a pass rushing threat like Myles Garrett, who just set the NFL record for single season sacks on his way to winning Defensive Player of the Year. And then for the Arizona Cardinals, where I thought Pleasant had the best shot of getting a defensive coordinator job due to his familiarity with now head coach Mike LaFleur, who was the Rams offensive coordinator for the past three seasons. However, LaFleur is looking to improve things on offense while maintaining the stability of the Cardinals defense set up by former head coach Jonathan Gannon by retaining defensive coordinator Nick Raylis. From my understanding, Raylis was the defensive play caller during Gannon's tenure. He came with Gannon over from Philadelphia, so they're maintaining that system. And of course, we expect the result of that move to be multiple moves on offense so that LaFleur is able to establish what he wants. In order to do that, LaFleur brought in Nathaniel Hackett, who coincidentally replaced him in New York, but also worked with his brother Matt in Green Bay, and kind of that same role that he's now working with Mike in Arizona, the non-play calling offensive coordinator. Lots taken, a whole lot to you know understand and swallow from around the league when it came to these multitude of moves. But that's what happened, and of course, Pleasant did not get any of those jobs, so he returns to the Rams, who have just hired Michael Hunter as their defensive backs coach, and Robert Wright from Syracuse as a defensive assistant. So I have no doubt in my mind those two new coaches are going to work hand in hand with Pleasant to fulfill Pleasant's vision for what the secondary could be, while the Rams as an organization figure out what moves they're going to take in order to give Pleasant the type of tools that he needs and what Chris Shula needs in order to fix the glaring issues that was associated with this unit in 2025. Issues, of course, that stem from being one of the cheapest defenses on the field, of course, last season. Moving forward for Pleasant, it does suck for him that he wasn't able to get any of these jobs, but this is not the end of the world. He's returning to an organization that deeply respects him, deeply respects his input, that he respects tremendously. I've spoken to him personally about this, and the love that he has for the Rams can truly not be put into words. So it's not anything negative for him. He's going to spend another year competing with a team that is going after a championship. And of course, next offseason could be the offseason for which when he breaks through, whether with the organization or somewhere else. With the organization, he's likely to be the best or top candidate to be an in-house hire if Sean McVay goes that route. In the scenario that Chris Shula moves on, either for a head coaching job or for some reason he's not retained, when Raheem Morris picked up the Falcons head coaching job, that was after the 2023 season, the decision for who was defensive coordinator came down to Shula and Pleasant, with Shula winning out. Expected, Shula was there for longer. He stayed with the team consecutively, whereas Pleasant kind of went around and did different jobs. And the most important part about that scenario is that Chris Shula and Sean McVay have known each other for over 20 years. They were roommates at the University of Miami of Ohio, so there is that deep connection. But there's also another deep connection with Pleasant because McVay has elevated Pleasant into being that assistant head coach role. Pleasant was an interim head coach or acting head coach during the preseason, so he had some reps under his belt. And like I've mentioned so far, he had tremendous input in-game tactical decisions, game planning, so on and so forth. A role that I think will expand because the Rams are making these multitude of hires on the defensive side of the ball in order to stay at the forefront of defensive evolution. If Pleasant is not elevated into the DC role next year because either Shula is retained as DC uh, or whatever reason, there is going to be tremendous interest from around the league for him. The reason is because of what's happening in Seattle. Look at the way the Seahawks defense is constructed. Yes, they have a phenomenal front seven, a tremendous defensive line, no doubt about it. But look at how deep and how unified that secondary is because of the investment. Guys like Nick Emmanwori, who should have been a first round pick, who I had the Seahawks picking all day long, but they were able to snag him in the second and get a great deal for him. Julian Love has been a big time performer. Devon Witherspoon, one of the best corners in the league. Rick Woolen, even though he hasn't emulated the early success of his career and during the later part, he was still a pivotal part of that unit. And Josh Jones, so many guys across the board. Then you look at the work Pleasant's unit did, where there wasn't that investment, where the Rams invested no money into the position in 2025, where you have guys like Emmanuel Forbes, who was considered a first round bust. You have guys like Kobe Durant, who people didn't really know what to take of him or to think of it. Guys like Cam Curl, who was seen as a flash in the pan player for Washington, who fizzled out after his rookie year. Guys like Cam Kitchens, who was not impressive early as a rookie, or impressive during his rookie year, but he did start to pick it up later on in that campaign. Guys like Darius Williams, who are on the backside of the career, and Keller Witherspoon, who kind of bounced around for a little bit and finally finding some stability with the Rams over the past 3 seasons, even though in 2023 and 2024 he was a practice squad call up and then signed to the active roster, despite having continued years of production. When you look at what Seattle did with the investment, you look at what the Rams are doing with the lack of investment, especially with Pleasant, who's kind of the guy that organizes that whole unit. Quentin Lake in that whole mix as well, Josh Wallace, Jalen McCullough, whole bunch of different dynamic players, right? And then you also have the introduction of these hybrid players and the usage and positioning. There's a lot to want in that, especially if you're a team that already has an established defensive line. When you look at a mind like Pleasant, you think to yourself, hey, this guy can get the best out of these players and set his defensive up schematically to allow our pass rushers to have time to get home. And when you look at guys like Jared Verse and Byron Young, both Pro Bowl selections, they didn't have the greatest of years. I think that their production could have been even better, especially for Verse, had certain things developed and gone their way, or for Young if his knee wasn't a constant issue with flare ups or whatever goes on with him. Obviously, it's good enough for him to be the high level player that he is. And who knows, maybe next year his knee was going to feel a lot better. Even Kobe Turner too. Even though Kobe Turner didn't miss games, or I don't think he missed any games, or even if he did, missed one or two here and there, he was still dealing with the wear and tear of the game. So the fact that they were still able to have the level of production they did, due to the even despite the lack of investment into the secondary, it speaks volumes. When you also look around the league, there is a culture and a counterculture, kind of like the McVay and Shanahan offenses on the defensive side of the ball, where you're seeing a lot of these Baltimore Ravens defensive philosophies start to affect the league. You look at some of these top defenses, McDonald's in Seattle, and then Jesse Minter, what he had with the Chargers. Now he's trying to bring back with Baltimore, and the utilization of those hybrid players. This is where the league is going, no doubt about it. So with all that being said, Pleasant, who obviously, as I said throughout this entire podcast, has been at that forefront and continues to be at that forefront of the evolution, that's what teams are going to look for. The problem with him is I don't think that he has the league wide recognition some of these other guys do, and that's going to hold him back. But I truly believe that with the expanding McVay tree in general, and then also the possibilities of Shula leaving next year, he's going to become a defensive coordinator for the 2027 season, which means the Rams have to make the most out of him in 2026. Keep in mind, though, with the addition of Michael Hunter, he spent the last two seasons at Ohio State. Davidson, Igbinosun, and also Caleb Downs, two names to keep in mind as the Rams try to figure out what they're going to do with this potentially being the last season with Matthew Stafford. This has been Brock Vieira for the Los Angeles Rams Insider Podcast. We'll catch y'all next time. Take care.